very, very good reason, because today in the Irish cannabis community, we have an outrageous date. Patrick Moore, who is a farmer, organic farmer from Limerick, is now in Limerick prison because he was sentenced on December 2nd and was sentenced for 5 years. It's the most outrageous, disgusting, to be honest, in my opinion, sentence that I've ever felt of. And so today, to mark this amazing date, 200 days, he's separated from his family. And so I've got a guy, Peter Reynolds, who's a friend of Patrick and the family, and is one of the few people I know that's regularly visiting Patrick. So let's go and find out what's it about. Peter, tell me about yourself, first of all. Who's Peter Reynolds?
Well, I'm a Brit. There
you go.
But I'm not an Englishman. I'm not one of them. I'm not English. I have to tell people that all the time. I'm Welsh. I'm a Welshman. I was born in Wales. Both my parents are Welsh. But in fact, since moving to Ireland 6 years.
There you go.
But I'm not an Englishman. I'm not one of them. I'm not English. I have to tell people that all the time. I'm Welsh. I'm a Welshman. I was born in Wales. Both my parents are Welsh. But in fact, since moving to Ireland 6 years ago, I've actually found out that my great, I don't know how many greats, but one of my grandmothers, sometime back in the mid-1800s, came from Cork.
Wow, there you go. That's good. That's good lineage there, man. We're big fans of Howard Marks on here, so no problem with the Welsh.
Presumably, she left as a result of the famines and emigrated to South Wales and married a miner.
Wow.
And
she went east.
I've been involved in the cannabis world
right.
since, well, I suppose really since I was 14 when I first smoked my first joint. Rolled up probably on either a Bob Dylan or a Rolling Stones LP, with tobacco, etc. But and then in the late, I'm 65 now. In the late 70s, I went on a couple of legalized cannabis campaign marches in London, and then. Leaping forward to 1983, which is still a long time ago, it's 40 years. I heard in the UK that the committee in Parliament was investigating cannabis, and I wrote to the committee. This is me, a 10 to 25-year-old. I wrote to the committee expressing my opinions and to my shock and horror, they invited me to come in. So there was me, naive little 25-year-old, went off to the Houses of Parliament and gave evidence about cannabis in front of this committee 40 years ago. I've given evidence to the UK Parliament on every inquiry about cannabis and drugs policy ever since. The remarkable thing about it is that the arguments haven't really changed. There's only two things. There's two things that have happened. Number one, we've had the discovery of the endocannabinoid system at the end of the 80s, which explains to us why the whole thing works and how it works. And secondly, in the last 10 years, now we've had evidence from places that have legalized it as to the effects. So that's really who I am. I mean, my journey since then has been through being a copywriter, then a medical journalist. Also, I've got a strong background in medicine. And then finally, in the early noughties, deciding I wanted to get involved in the campaign, and becoming elected as the leader of Clear Cannabis Law Reform, which is the oldest established cannabis group in the UK.
Can you tell me about that, Peter? Sorry to interrupt. I might do that occasionally, but can you tell me about Clear? What is Clear? Is it global or just UK?
Oh, it's UK. I mean, it was formed in 1999, and it was formed initially as the Legalized Cannabis Alliance. And I was elected as leader of the Legalized Cannabis Alliance in 2011. And my initial background was in marketing and advertising as a copywriter. And I, together with members of the committee, etc., decided that we needed rebranding, really. It was a very tired look and everything. And so we rebranded as Clear Cannabis Law Reform. We wanted to get an
acronym. The acronym is Cannabis Law. What's what?
Cannabis Law, Education and Reform.
Okay.
But I mean, it just became clear. Everyone's forgotten that now. It just became clear, and the truth about cannabis is clear. So that's a good line.
Yeah, there you go.
But anyway, so the key thing that really happened then was the build up to 2018, when medical cannabis was legalized in the UK. And those last 8 years really leading up to that were a very exciting time. We changed our technique. The campaign moved away from demos and marching in the streets and protests, because frankly they hadn't worked. They didn't get us anywhere. And we moved into a more, we put on suits and ties, and we went and met MPs, and we took delegations of medical cannabis users to Parliament, and had them sit in front of the MPs and ministers who could actually see they were real people, and they didn't have, things coming out of their ears, and they didn't all have hair down to their waists, and and we changed opinions, and that led in the end, with the assistance of two, it's the same story as in Ireland with Ava Toomey, God rest her soul. The thing that finally changed it was two small children with epilepsy.
Sure.
But anyway, medical cannabis was legalized in 2018.
But just to go back, the tactic that got it there, you feel, wasn't kind of boots on the streets, it was more political. So
boots on the streets, I would say, worked against us.
Right.
I mean, I know this is a view that is not popular with people, but I mean, I'm telling you based on experience. Because what I think we found was that MPs, who were the people who make the decisions, like TDs in Ireland, they're the people who make the decisions, the only people who make the decisions. We alienated them. We made ourselves look like rebels and renegades, and they were more interested in engagement. Engagement and persuasion works better than protest. I
think in certainly the south of Ireland, where it's really born out of a lot of frustration that people just feel they've been banging their heads off walls for so long, that there needs to be civil disobedience, there needs to be that kind of culture of Martin Luther King, all of that kind of thing, that nothing will change if we just leave it to the politicians. This is, I feel I've given up a little bit,
I mean, getting engagement in Ireland, as I know to my, I've lived here 6 years now, and it takes you a while to begin to. I mean, I don't pretend to completely understand it yet, but
I'll take a while.
but I mean, it's very difficult getting engagement in Ireland. Very difficult. And the main thing that enabled us to get engagement, and what really made it happen, was I don't know if you remember the period of the coalition governments in the UK.
Sure.
The Liberal Democrats and the Conservatives were in government, and the Liberal Democrats were much more liberal, and they enabled us to get in front of ministers and things. That was really what happened. But anyway, I moved to Ireland in 2017.
But it is interesting, Peter, because in the last call I had Northern Ireland Canna guy on, and we have the two jurisdictions on this island. And so, I mean, how movement, do you see there's a reciprocal way that could happen? It's a huge achievement to legalize cannabis in UK and have it available to people.
Well, I mean, I think, do I see a reciprocal? I mean, certainly as far as Northern Ireland is concerned, I mean, I make my living out of cannabis now, I'm very happy to say, and I'm currently the lead consultant on the development of a medicinal cannabis cultivation facility just outside Belfast.
Great.
This will open sometime within the next 18 months. It's subject to incredibly strict regulation under the UK Medicines Regulation of the Home Office, but it will open sometime in the next 18 months, and it will be the first legal facility on the island of Ireland.
Fantastic.
And as you know, Northern Ireland is in a unique situation vis-a-vis the EU because of the Good Friday Agreement and the Windsor Protocol and all these bureaucratic. But nevertheless, we should be able. I say we. Growth Industries is the name of the company. Should be able to export to Ireland and through Ireland to the rest of the EU, and that's what our plan. That's what our plans are. But I mean, you can get flour in Ireland on prescription in theory now. I think there's only 1 or 2 cases of it happening, and I know the people who were importing flour from Bedrican, the first consignment they had to send back because it had passed its sell-by date.
This was Olio, Richard Craig from Olio. Yeah, aware of this one. I mean, that's where the frustration seems to continue. Even he is, you know, when he's got the flower in, and still then it has to be destroyed. So it kind of feels like we're one step forward, two back all the time. And
I mean, Ireland's, you know, there's no doubt in my mind, and I've got quite wide experience in this, you know, that Ireland's medical establishment is the most backwards medical establishment in Europe.
I would agree. Is that the barrier? Do you see it as being ultimately the big barrier?
Yeah. And I think there's been a theory, well, there is still a theory that prevails, not just in Ireland, not just in the UK, that, you know, there's a big conspiracy by the pharmaceutical industry to deny access to cannabis. I don't agree with that. My experience of the pharmaceutical industry, and I've worked with the pharmaceutical industry, so I mean, maybe that's why I'm saying, you know, you can tell me I'm a big pharma apologist, but I mean, the pharmaceutical, they're businesses. They don't care what they sell. They don't care whether their API, their active pharmaceutical ingredients, is opioids or cannabis. They really don't. You know,
shockingly, we know this. You know, we know this, that they don't care.
Well, yeah, but the recent successful legalization campaign in Germany, even though it's got snowed down in the EU bureaucracy now, was funded by the German pharmaceutical companies because they want to sell medicinal cannabis, but the Schedule 1 status of cannabis makes it completely non-viable for them to, you know, I mean, I've spent the 6 years I've been in Ireland trying to get licenses. I've been hired by a number of Canadian LPs, by one particular consortium between the UK, California and Canada to try and get licensed in Ireland. And the resistance from the HPRA and the Department of Health is irrational. I mean, it's irrational. That's the only way of putting it. They've got no logical, you know, and the jobs that are being, the medical benefit that is being lost to the people of Ireland, the employment opportunities, the business opportunities that are being lost to Ireland because of this block is ridiculous. And this block doesn't come from pharmaceutical companies, it comes from doctors, it comes from senior clinicians.
And we have them, the CRA, you know, who have countersign all these daft documents that are completely, you know, without any kind of foundation.
They don't understand anything about cannabis.
Yes.
They know nothing about it. I mean, even the expert working group that the HPRA set up to prepare for the medical cannabis access program, they're called an expert group. None of them knows a damn thing about cannabis. I've in fact got an FOI into the Department of Health at the moment, asking about the review of MCAP and asking what are the qualifications and experience of the experts on the panel. And it's the usual story with FOIs. They're doing everything they can to avoid answering it. You know, I've already had to go to appeal. I'm now at the point where I've got to go to the commissioner because they just don't want to answer the question because the question is they don't know what they're talking about. The answer is they don't know what they're talking about.
But even when they're handed everything, they have, when you have studies on this and studies on that, and everything is there, and you have so to get a drug like Epidiolex or Sativex over the line, there has to be multitude of studies and multitude of everything has to before they can produce a drug like that. And yet, even then, there was a guy on the health committee, a doctor that was in, like, he's in epilepsy, and he was a pediatric epilepsy as well. And so he was still kind of going, oh, I'm not ever going to prescribe that. And he's like still able to sit up there while we have the two, like they're now sadly passed away, Ava and Abby. And, you know, they're there and they're alive. And Deborah Downey is a force of nature, and Vera Toomey. And the fact that this guy can sit there as a kind of qualified pediatric epilepsy doctor, and he can still say, even though Sativex, even though they're qualified drugs, and he says, I won't prescribe. What do you do about that?
Same thing in the UK. There's an organisation in the UK called the BPNA, the British Paediatric Neurology Association, and the president or the chair, I can't remember his title exactly, of that is a man with a very Irish name, which escapes me at the moment. Finbar O'Callaghan, that's right.
There you go.
And he has basically been the block on NHS funding of medicinal cannabis for epileptic children in the UK. You know, they prefer, under their guidelines, you have to give a child brain surgery before giving them cannabis. But if you look at Finbar O'Callaghan's bio, and if you look on all the various hospitals and private clinics he's responsible for, and look at his interests in things, guess what his interests are? Running clinical trials, particularly on cannabinoid-based medicines. So the truth of the matter is, he just wants to be paid the fat fees to run the clinical trials and get the results out, which he will then say are okay, and then everything will unlock.
And write his papers.
That is the truth.
And he gets to write his papers, which is the thing that gives him the, you know, the currency to be even more lauded than he is. Yeah, it's a very shocking barrier, and I know it well. Even over these talks in this last, I only started these in April, and the idea was to kind of run them as a complementary, like creating a online platform for voices from different areas of the Canna community. But Deborah Downey would really, you know, talking about Abby, and she wants Abby to have a legacy. She's pleading that this little girl that you know, that she's died at 19. She was never supposed to make it past, I don't know, past 10 or something. But in those, she was riding her bike to school at 6, and then the first seizure kicked in at 7 or around there. And Deborah's thing is that when that first seizure happens, there is no other going to anything else. They had to do things that do that. They had that kind of electrode thing on the head, all those horrible, invasive procedures that they put Abby through, and the family has to live through all of that horror. And it is a horror. And so it is, to me, it's you feel like it's hard to make sense of it sometimes, that these people are not even when they're supposedly the qualified people who are demanding. They're the ones demanding.
It's all about power. It's about and you know, I think doctors feel threatened by cannabis because they don't, as going back to what I said in the beginning, they don't
understand it.
And you know, we know, you know, it's a truism which people in the cannabis world know, that doctors are not educated in the endocannabinoid system, and they simply don't understand how it works. So that changes, you know, we're going. But I mean, you know, I mean, I have, for instance, in my submission to the Citizens Assembly, I have gathered together testimonials from a number of prescribing doctors in the UK, all of whom I know personally, and 2 of them are consultant psychiatrists.
Right.
And they are prescribing cannabis in the UK for mental health conditions. And these
without fear of psychosis.
These are deeply moving testimonies, which explain how they had been educated and brought up with the idea that cannabis was this dangerous thing, and then they began to learn about it, and the overwhelming joy they've seen from the results it brings to some people.
I was on that webinar recently with the prescribers. So you had there's 2 doctors particularly focused on that, and it's the most recent one. It was only like 2 weeks ago, and yeah, you kind of go like, there's no mystery anymore. You know, there's only just people needing to accept realities, and in their own words, the studies are there. Go look at them and go and absorb them, and that it's a paper, it's designed, it's there for you to read. And still, it seems that they won't take the word, because I did a little tweet during when that thing was happening. I was saying, are any of our doctors on this call, on this webinar, this English webinar? Because still, at the end of the day, you know, there is a little bit of like, I have a very strong experience of going east for treatment for my MS. And I've been to Trinity. I did a healthcare specialism in innovation in Trinity. And what I realized in there is that Irish medicine just looks west all the time. We looked at and if it's not FDA approved, if it doesn't have these X, Y, and Z rubber stamps, then they totally discount everything. And within that, we also have this massive mine of experience from Uruguay, who are always forgotten. I never get that. Uruguay did this before anybody. They legalized, and they're a great country, Uruguay, and they're keeping the data, and they have decided that cannabis social clubs is the way to manage cannabis. So taking cannabis apart, that's the way to do it, because everybody's in a safe environment and they're sharing and all of that situation. So it's like we have parked cannabis, except for the doctors.
Exactly. Yes. Yeah. So you know, and we can see the fight back that's going on about, because I mean the direction of travel of the Citizens' Assembly is obvious. You know,
Right.
I was very worried about about Mary Cannon being on the panel, and even about Paul Reed himself being the chair. But credit to him, I think he's. But I mean, we can see in the article in the Irish Times today from Dr. Chris Luke. These people can see the writing on the wall. They can see the way the Citizens' Assembly is going to go, and they're now mounting a rearguard action. Bobby Smith is panicking. Mary Cannon, despite her promises not to get involved in the politics of it at all while she was on the panel, has started tweeting about cannabis again. A letter in the Irish Examiner yesterday trying to knock back the Irish Medical Times survey about most Irish doctors, saying cannabis should be decriminalised. She was poo-pooing it, and she promised she wouldn't do things like this. So we see the way the Citizens' Assembly going. The big issue really is whether or not once we get to the end and they submit their recommendations to government, whether or not they will be followed.
Yeah, and I mean, it's not all about cannabis, and absolutely it's not. I mean, the Citizens' Assembly is very much about drugs in use, and I mean, there's so much layers to that. And to be honest, I think it's kind of been very much, I wouldn't say bogged down, but it's been focused on the kind of a lot of negatives, and there's been no feel good.
I think obviously we have to, I think everybody does have enormous sympathy for people who are ravaged by the effects, and not just the people the users themselves, but the families, the people ravaged by the devastating effects of, particularly opiate and crack cocaine addiction. I've seen it myself, But as Professor Johanna Ivers told us at the first Citizens' Assembly meeting, 90% of drugs use is without harm. And we can't base drugs policy we don't base alcohol policy on alcoholics.
Exactly.
We base alcohol,
and that's across the board. I mean, where do you sit on like all the drugs? I mean, are you legalized? I would personally, it's a health issue, whether it's cocaine, whether it's
I think the word legalize is very misleading. I think the word I prefer to use is regulate. We know. I mean, my view on this is I'm actually writing an article on precisely this in the moment. We know how to deal with the heroin problem. We know how to do that already. You prescribe heroin, injectable heroin, diamorphine, to people on the basis that they continue going to treatment. And none of these solutions, by the way, work instantly. They don't work instantly. You have to give them time to work. And people won't abide completely by the rules all the way down. People will still go out and score on the streets, but you can never completely eliminate harms from drugs. All you can do is minimize them. But we know how to deal with the heroin problem. You prescribe it so that people get safe, clean doses of known strength, and they don't have to go to the black market. And that also begins to undermine the gangs who are selling the stuff and are causing mayhem on the streets. We know how to deal with cannabis. The same thing, you regulate it, either through a social club model or through a dispensary model, through a small, limited grow your own model. We know this works. We know it undercuts the gangs and again stops the violence and the drug debt intimidation and everything. We know how to deal with MDMA. If you look at the number of doses of MDMA that are taken over the last 30 years, it's actually safer than over-the-counter painkillers. And yet, this is with and the people who die on MDMA are because they've taken a massive overdose because they don't know how much was in the pill or how pure the powder was, or because it wasn't MDMA, it was PMA or whatever. And so again, all you do is you just make sure that it comes from a clean supply, and that way you make MDMA literally safer than aspirin. So we know how to deal with these problems already. We really do, and it's just about having the courage to take these decisions.
Is that exclusively to the politicians to make that move, or are we looking for visionary politicians because you don't see them anywhere?
Well, at the end of the day, I mean, ultimately, it is only the politicians who make these decisions.
Yeah.
So we have to get them on side.
They're the legislators, and regulation requires legislation.
Exactly.
So on that note, and that's a kind of criminalization note, to go back to where this kind of the beginning of this call is poor old Patrick down in Limerick. So I want to just before we
up in Limerick.
Okay, you're down with the what do you call them, the Healy Ray. You're in Healy Ray country.
Yes, yeah.
Certainly turn you into a politician down there, right? Well, you have a lot of work to kind of get those guys. They're a little bit. I'm not going to look at. Not even going to comment on them. But you know,
like Healy Ray actually knocks on my door.
Of course he does.
No,
anybody who dies near you will certainly be getting their hand shook. Yeah, so anyway, so you're down, but we're talking Limerick now, and the reason we're talking Limerick is Patrick Murphy, because that's just the most outrageous sentencing. So can you tell me a little bit about your relationship with Patrick? You were at the court, I believe, is that correct?
I've known Pat for about 4 or 5 years. He lives in, I mean, I'm right on the border of Kerry and Limerick.
Right.
So I go shopping in Abbeyfield, which is in Limerick, but that's 5 miles from me. And
that's where his farm is.
Pat lives just outside Abbeyfield. I've known him for about 4 or 5 years. He and his wife, well, he's not his wife actually. They're living in sin, or whatever you want to call it. But they run a small cafe in Abbeyfield called Gourmet Green, which is a very nice place actually.
I think that everybody out there, you should make your way to Abbeyfield. Does it have a name, the cafe?
Gourmet Green.
Right. Let's support that cannabis community of Ireland, you know, and that's how you can help that family. Tell me, go on. Sorry for interrupting, Peter.
That's okay. So I've known him for a while. Patrick was running his own hydroponic store, selling feed and, you know, all the various equipments for growing your own peppers at home, or your own tomatoes, you know, whatever you might want to do with it. You know, he's a very gentle man. Very gentleman, very softly spoken, and I was aware of the fact that this had happened to him. I didn't know it took a while for it all to come out, but you know, it was horrific. I mean, he wasn't in at the time. I've been to his house a few times. He lives in a quite remote area, in a nice house with a huge polytunnel on the side. The polytunnel doesn't contain anything illicit. Although he does grow his own tobacco in it, remarkably, and it's the only place I've ever seen in Ireland, down here anyway, where people can grow tomatoes successfully. Because I used to grow tomatoes very successfully in the UK, but I can't do so here. There's too much damn wind. You know, the bust, the raid was horrific, because Pat was out at the time. His 2 kids, who were lovely kids, I mean, they're 15, 16. Were home with Ali, and 15 armed Gardaí, right, with automatic weapons.
Wow.
Pointing weapons at the kids' heads.
Come on, to a family home.
Now, Pat knows, I mean, I won't bore you with all the stories and theories he's got, but I mean, he believes they were under surveillance some time before, which clearly they must have been. But if they were under surveillance, how they managed to come up with the idea that he was some sort of, you know, Pablo Escobar or something. Can
I just stop you there, Peter, because I'd like to understand. So he's skilled enough to do extraction, and so he was growing and doing extraction, and the oils that he was producing were what he was giving to people locally.
Yeah, I mean, you know, he doesn't make any bones about it. He was selling flour to a small group of friends and associates.
Right.
The oil that he was making, he was giving away. I mean, he was selling the flour to fund that, basically. You know, big time drug dealer. He drives an old Land Rover. There's no, he's not Pablo Escobar. A long way from it, you know. You know, I mean, the most tragic thing about the story of the patients is, I mean, it was in the article that I wrote. You know, in particular, 2 patients, one old chap with Huntington's who wasn't even able to swallow, but once he went on the oil with Pat, he was able to swallow, and he was able. But the 10-year-old boy, the boy who was 10, Pat had been providing oil to with leukemia. Pat had been providing oil to him for 4 years, I believe, since he was 6, and he'd only been given 2 years to live.
Wow.
Unfortunately, since Pat has been arrested, the boy has passed away.
Wow.
Now I can't, obviously one can't say that it's definitely because he doesn't have access to the oil anymore, but it speaks for itself, doesn't it? He was selling small amounts of cannabis. He wasn't, we're only talking about a few plants here. We're not talking about an industrial operation. He was selling small amounts of cannabis flower to friends and associates. But the main purpose of what he was doing was to produce oil for a few, maybe I don't know exactly how many, maybe a dozen sick people who he was providing oil to on free of charge, and they were experiencing some fantastic results as a result of it. He was sentenced. He was sentenced to 5 years. The final 2 years suspended. So it's a 3-year jail sentence. As I understand it, in Ireland, you have to serve 3/4 of your sentence. But this it's much less clear than it is. I mean, the Irish judicial system is much less clear and much less sort of buttoned down than it is in the UK. In the UK, you only serve half your sentence. But there seems to be some discussion that Pat might get early release.
You would hope so. Come on,
But then there appeared to be a hitch because he didn't have a probation officer, and without a probation officer, he couldn't be considered for early release. But apparently, and the reason he couldn't get a probation officer was because there aren't any. But anyway, that difficulty appears to have been overcome. Violet Ann Wynne, as well as Gino, are both on his case. Violet Ann has wrote to Simon Harris while he was Minister of Justice, and I think as a result of that, again, who knows what goes on behind closed doors, but I think as a result of that, or certainly that was part of the reason that he has been approved to transfer to an open prison.
It's just a shocking sentence, and so you're quite au fait with what's the lines there that pushed him into a kind of that levity of sentence, like to get 5 years.
Well, the Irish Misuse of Drugs Act 77 has this appalling amendment called Section 15A, which specified that anybody caught with, and it was actually brought in the days when you were using punts. And there was a limit set. I don't know how many punts it was at the time, but it was converted to 13,000 euros. And so that figure hasn't changed since the days of punts. It hasn't been escalated. Wow.
How long ago since we had punts? I mean, Jesus, nothing is updated here, for God's sake.
And the theory was.
And are they all? So what I was trying to get to. So they're all valuations done by somebody, done by the police who gathered up the plants, or
well, yes. I mean, the Guardian, they're quite open about it. I've got it in writing from them. They value cannabis at 20 euros a gram, irrespective of what it is. The bulk of the cannabis they found from Pat was trim. It wasn't flour; it was trim. It was over 2.5 kilos of trim, which was for making oil.
Yeah, of course.
But I mean, it doesn't matter whether it's top quality flour or whether it's trim. It all gets valued at 20 euros a gram, and each plant gets valued at 800 euros. So, they managed to get Pat's valuation up to over 60,000 euros.
Wow.
And the limit for this Section 15A is 13,000. And if you have over 13,000 euros, it is supposedly a mandatory 10-year sentence with a maximum sentence of life.
So this is why he's got his 5-year sentence.
In fact, although they say mandatory, in fact, it's not mandatory. The whole thing is just cockeyed. It's not mandatory at all, because the judge was able to. She said that she considered the starting points for St. Patrick's was 7 years, and in view of the fact that he cooperated with the Gardaí, etc., and he had a good previous character, she'd reduce it to 5 years and she'd spend the final 2 years. I mean, to be fair to her, it's a completely unjustifiable sentence. Let's not forget that. But to be fair to her, she gave him the right sentence, within the context.
Within the law.
Sure, yeah, she did give him the right sentence, and there was certainly no point in him appealing it because it could have come out worse.
So how's he doing, Peter? You're the kind of to us in the outside world and cannabis community, you're kind of the man who goes to see them quite. How are the family doing, and how's he doing?
They're all doing very well. They're a very strong family. They've got a fantastic, family units. They're all very intelligent. They're all very strong, but gentle with it.
Yeah. The best of us.
Exactly. Ali, his partner, is from Scotland, and the two kids are delightful. They're absolutely delightful. I mean, they all work and help out with Ali in the cafe, where they produce sort of organic, lunches and things. It really is a lovely place. I mean, I don't know anywhere better in Abbeyfield to get anything to eat, to tell you that much.
People go to Abbeyfield and hit this cafe and support this family because it's an incredible story, and we keep on pushing out here in any way we can, Peter, to try and I hope that maybe is he aware of the things that are going out, like Citizens Assembly and all that?
Oh, yes, he is. And I've spoken to him about that. Well, I've been there. I was with him 2 weeks ago. I told him everything that was going on with the Citizens Assembly. I told him about my trip to Cannabis Europa in London a few weeks back, where I was explaining to him how when he walked into the Cannabis Europa exhibition hall in the Barbican in central London, there was a sign saying, "Please do not consume medicinal cannabis here, but you're welcome to do so outside on the terrace," which is a remarkable thing, really, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
What a cultural change that is,
Yeah.
And he's a strong man. He's got a good job. I mean, the job is wheeling the bins around the prison and emptying the bins, but it's a good job because it means he's outside. It means he's moving between different buildings. It's a trusted job, He knows he's not the staff, the screws, whatever you want to call them. They know he's not a danger to anybody or a serious criminal. He's keeping his nose clean.
He's kind of contenting himself to see it out, whatever.
Spoken with it. The Ali and the kids go to see him regularly. I mean, as with all these things, there's uncertainties about how many visits is he allowed, and it seems to change from week to week, and there's no clarity on when he might go to an open prison,
Well, I'm going to keep it. I'll keep a page live. I've got a count up clock. I've had it there since the beginning, and I'm going to keep that live. And I'm developing the pages, and the website is under development at the moment. But definitely, it's a story. Absolutely, I feel, personally about this is just such an injustice to me, and I'm a patient. I'm in a different country that I'm allowed have these simple things. I'm allowed to grow my few plants, my medicine. It took me a while around the social clubs made it possible for me to discover what strains worked for me personally. And that's the way cannabis is complex. And I don't deny that to anybody. It is a complex thing to find the thing that works best for you. And so I love my blue strains and the things that work for me. My MS, I still have neuropathic pain in my feet and my lower limbs. And so, I found the strains that work for me. And when it does, I have a quality of life.
I have neuropathic pain in my feet. I mean, as I said, I'm 65 and I'm beginning to develop health problems that you get with age. I have neuropathic.
There you go.
Cannabis doesn't touch it. Unfortunately.
But they're living down you're getting hammered by what they call it, the Gulf Stream weather down there, so can't be helping. Look at Peter, it has been amazing to talk to you, always wanted to, and it's a catch-up. We're here, the reason is 200 days Patrick is inside in Limerick, and everybody needs to keep that in their mind, and because that's, if you are an activist and you are involved and you're looking to make changes happening, these are the reasons, because this is a man who's helping patients. And
send him a card.
Yeah, how about that?
I'll give you the address. You can put it on the YouTube page.
Yes, no, I'll put it in the description of the YouTube, and please send the man a card, and let's unload cards on top of him. Yeah. So Peter, thanks a lot, man, and it was great to connect with you, and great to hear. Despite the accent, we're taking you into our hearts.
Well, I think I'm, 1/16th Irish, I think.
Yeah, well, there you go. I'm looking at the Welsh thing. It's like I said before, the very first talk I did here was with Johnny Keane. We have a lot of graw for the Welsh with Howard Marks, who made a lot of friends in this part of the world.
And as I understand it, the plans for the Irish Republic were really hatched in a Welsh prison.
There you go.
Weren't they? When the rebels were first shipped over to Britain to be incarcerated, they were imprisoned in Wales.
In Wales, of course, they were. Behan, I think. Behan was in Wales, I think, when his stint as Borstal boy.
So
I think that was a Welsh gig for him. Look, great stuff, Peter. Thanks a lot, and we're back soon with another blinding talk. Canna We Talk Now? Cheers, guys.